My name's Luca. I'm 27 now, but this story started last year on my 26th birthday. It was supposed to be a normal celebration. Nothing flashy, just a small gathering at my parents' house like we'd done every year since I could remember. I'd stopped expecting anything grand from them a long time ago. Honestly, I was mostly there for my little niece, who loved birthdays no matter whose they were, and for the carrot cake I made myself because I knew they'd never get it right. I walked in that day carrying the cake in one hand and a bottle of cheap wine in the other, already sensing the weird tension in the air, but I brushed it off. I always did. The dining table was set a little messily, like my mom had thrown it together last minute. My sister, Clara, was scrolling through her phone at the table, barely looking up when I arrived. My Uncle Rick was already 2 drinks in, and my dad, well, he stood near the window with that same worn-out smirk he always wore when I walked into a room. The one that said, "You're not really part of this." I placed the cake down and forced a smile. "Happy birthday to me, I guess," I muttered, half joking. No one laughed. We sat down to eat. No one had even bothered to ask what I wanted for dinner, so it was lasagna. Again, I have nothing against lasagna, but it wasn't about the food. It was about the effort or the complete lack of it. I tried to make small talk, asked Clara about her job at the design firm, brought up my own recent promotion at work which I'd worked hard for, and even asked my mom about the garden she usually loved talking about. Silence. And then came the moment. That one moment that pulled the rug from under me and shattered whatever scraps of hope I still had about fixing this broken family. My dad raised his glass of whiskey and said, "You know, Luca, if you vanished tomorrow, life would actually be easier for all of us." There was a beat of silence. I thought, no, I hoped that maybe I misheard him. Maybe it was some terrible attempt at dark humor. But then Rick chuckled like it was the funniest thing he'd heard all day. "Man's got a point," he snorted. I turned to my mom. Her face was blank, not shocked, not upset, just vacant. She didn't say a word, didn't even flinch. Clara stabbed her fork into the cake, took a bite, and mumbled, "Well, you do always stir things up." I couldn't move for a second. I stared at them. All of them. I wasn't sure whether to cry or scream or just walk out. My throat felt tight. My chest burned, but I said nothing. I stood up slowly, nodded once, and said, "Got it." Then I left. No scene. No yelling. I just walked out into the night, drove back to my tiny apartment, and sat in the dark for hours trying to understand what had just happened. And you know what hurt the most? It wasn't even that my dad had said that. It was how casual it was. Like I was just some mild inconvenience they'd rather not deal with. I didn't sleep that night. The words kept echoing in my head. "If you vanish tomorrow." So I decided to do exactly that. Not out of spite. Not at first. I just needed to be gone. To be somewhere they couldn't reach. Somewhere they couldn't dismiss me like a piece of clutter. The next morning I packed my bags. I didn't have much, but I took everything important, my documents, my laptop, a few framed photos from better days. I called my boss and used up the 3 weeks of vacation I'd saved. I didn't tell anyone where I was going. I shut off my phone. I disappeared. I headed to the cabin. It was a small, secluded place in the woods that my grandfather used to own. When he passed, it sat untouched for years. No one in the family cared about it. Too far, too rustic, no Wi-Fi, no plumbing updates. But I loved that place. Grandpa used to take me there every summer. I had the keys, and the deed had quietly passed to me after he passed. Something the rest of the family never bothered to read the paperwork about. It was mine. A fact I'd never advertised because to them, I was the black sheep, the burden, the kid who never quite fit in. I arrived that afternoon. The cabin was dusty, the fireplace untouched, but it felt more like home than my parents' house ever did. I lit a fire, unpacked my books, and breathed for the first time in months. No calls, no expectations, no sarcastic remarks. Just quiet. Peaceful, intentional quiet. The first few days were just healing. I cooked, hiked, journaled, and finally let myself cry. I relived that birthday dinner 1,000 times in my mind. And each time I found more clarity. I hadn't been loved in that house. I'd been tolerated. Barely. And now I was done being tolerable. A week passed before I finally checked my backup phone. I kept it off, only using it for emergencies. But curiosity got the better of me, so I turned it on just long enough to see the barrage of messages and missed calls. "Clara, where are you?" "Dad's freaking out." "Mom, please call me when you can. It's urgent." "Rick, we need to talk." "Seriously." "Dad, call me. Now." I frowned. That was unexpected, so I did some digging. I used my laptop to check a few things from a secure hotspot nearby, and what I found made my blood run cold. Credit card payments had bounced. Late fees piling up. Clara's car had been towed. A lien placed on the family house. All in just a week. And every single bill had my name on it. Because they'd been using my credit. My name. For years. They thought I wouldn't notice. That I wouldn't care. That I owed them. My dad had me co-sign on things when I was barely 19, promising it would build credit for me. My mom had quietly used my social to open an emergency line of credit when Clara lost her job 2 years ago. I hadn't noticed because I never checked. I trusted them. But when I vanished, so did their safety net. And now they were desperate. But I wasn't ready to pick up the phone just yet. Not until I understood the full extent of what they'd done. Not until I knew everything. So I drove into town the next day to speak with a lawyer. And that's when I discovered something that made me sit down in the parking lot, clutching the folder in my hands, barely able to breathe. Something they didn't expect I'd ever find out. And something I planned to use very, very carefully. The lawyer's name was Mira. Late 30s, sharp eyes, no-nonsense voice that cut through pleasantries like a scalpel. I walked into her office with a folder full of bank statements, co-signed agreements, and a numb feeling in my gut. She flipped through everything slowly, her fingers pausing every few pages, her expression tightening with each new revelation. By the end, she closed the folder, leaned back in her chair, and said, "Luca, this isn't just financial abuse. This is fraud. If you wanted to, you could press criminal charges." I blinked at her. "Against my parents?" She didn't hesitate. "Yes. And your sister, too. All three of them used your identity. There's a paper trail a mile long. They forged signatures, opened multiple lines of credit in your name, and she tapped one document with her pen. They leveraged your name as collateral for the second mortgage on their house." It felt like the floor dropped beneath me. "Wait, what mortgage?" I asked. She opened another file and slid it across the desk. 3 years ago, right after your grandfather passed, your father and mother filed paperwork claiming you agreed to co-sign the equity loan on the family home. They used the property value to take out $120,000. That's how they paid off Clara's credit card debt, Rick's DUI lawyer, and apparently part of your mom's failed catering business. I sat back in the chair, my hands trembling slightly. They forged my name. Mira nodded. They never thought you'd find out. As long as you kept paying your own bills and never questioned your credit score, it worked for them. And if I hadn't disappeared, they'd still be leeching off of you. I stared at the ceiling for a long moment, then looked back down. "So, what are my options?" Mira folded her hands. "You can report the fraud. That'll trigger a full investigation. Charges could follow. Or, if you'd rather avoid court, you could hit them where it really hurts. Financially, we freeze the accounts. Demand repayment. You have enough proof here to force them into default. And the house." She gave me a look. "Well, technically, since you never agreed to the mortgage, the loan is invalid. The bank will investigate. And if it's confirmed, the entire mortgage could be reversed. That house would be flagged. Possibly repossessed. At the very least, they'll have to refinance it without you." It took me a long time to speak. When I finally did, my voice came out quiet, controlled. "I want to take back everything. Every penny. Every asset they stole. Not because I need it, but because they thought they were entitled to it." Mira just nodded. "Then we start today." And we did. First, she helped me file a fraud report with the credit bureaus. We flagged every account tied to my name. That meant every card they used stopped working immediately. Their phone bills, utilities, even the car insurance under Clara's name, but funded with my credit, froze within 48 hours. Next, she had me send a formal demand letter. Not a text. Not a call. A notarized letter delivered through certified mail. It laid out every violation. The forged documents. The misused credit. The unauthorized loans. It ended with one sentence. "You have 10 days to settle the debt or legal proceedings will begin." I didn't expect them to respond right away. But I was wrong. The texts came first. Dozens of them. My mom begging for a conversation. Clara accusing me of ruining her life. My dad's message was short and smug. "You're bluffing. We did what we had to do for the family." I didn't reply. Then the voicemail started. Rick called, trying to play mediator. "Come on. Kid. You're making this worse than it is. You've always been the responsible one. Just come back and we'll fix it as a family." But I wasn't going back. Not this time. I stayed in the cabin, letting Mira handle everything from her office. Every day, I felt lighter. Every day, they grew more desperate. One morning, Clara sent a selfie of her crying in front of her repossessed car. That same afternoon, my mom left me a message that cracked halfway through, her voice barely holding together. "Luca, please. Your father's blood pressure has been through the roof. We're behind on everything. We might lose the house. This isn't like you. You've always been the peacemaker. I almost felt bad. Almost. But then I remembered her sitting there in silence on my birthday while my dad said the ugliest thing a father can say to his child. And then came day 10. I was out shopping when a car pulled up the long gravel driveway to the cabin. At first, I thought it might be a delivery from town. But when I stepped around the trees and saw who was getting out of the car, I froze. It was them. All of them. My dad. My mom. Clara. Even Rick lagging behind. They looked older. Worn down. Like the stress of the last week had aged them 5 years. My dad's shirt was untucked, Clara's makeup was smudged, and my mom looked like she hadn't slept in days. They stood there, huddled together like a defense line. My dad stepped forward. "We need to talk." I didn't say anything. I just leaned the axe against the log, wiped my hands, and walked up the porch slowly. I opened the front door wide, and standing just behind it was Mira. She held the folder in her hand. And she was smiling. Mira didn't move. She just stood there, half-shadowed by the doorway, holding that thick manila folder like it was a weapon. And in a way, it was. My dad blinked, confused for a second, then narrowed his eyes like he finally realized she wasn't just some friend or random visitor. He looked back at the others, then back at me. "What is this?" he said, trying to keep his voice low and calm. Like he was still in control. Like we were about to have a rational family discussion over coffee. I didn't answer. I stepped aside and gestured toward the small front porch table. "Sit. If you want to talk, we talk here. All of you." They hesitated. Rick muttered something under his breath, probably about lawyers. But eventually they climbed the steps and took their seats. My mom's hands were shaking. Clara didn't even make eye contact. She kept pulling at a loose thread on her sleeve like she was trying to disappear into it. Once they were all seated, Mira came out, calm as ever, and set the folder down on the table between us. She didn't sit. She didn't need to. "I'm Mira Kovac," she said simply. "I'm Mr. DiLorenzo's legal representative. Before any of you speak, I'm going to remind you this conversation is being recorded and that anything you say can be used in legal proceedings." Dad rolled his eyes, scoffing. "Are you serious? You brought a lawyer to ambush your own family?" Mira didn't even blink. "You ambushed him first. For the past 7 years. Clara finally looked up. "This is crazy. You're blowing everything out of proportion." "No," I said quietly, stepping forward. "You're just not used to hearing me speak without backing down." That shut her up. Mira opened the folder and pulled out a few sheets. "Let's start with the forged mortgage documents," she said, laying out the paperwork. "Here's the signature you claimed Luca gave you, signed while he was attending a company retreat in another country. His passport confirms it." My mom opened her mouth, but Mira raised a hand. "I'm not done." More pages were laid out. Credit card applications in my name. A car lease for Rick's son, underwritten by my credit score. Clara's boutique loan, filed with my social security number. My dad leaned forward, his voice rising. "We're family. These weren't crimes. We were just trying to get by." Myra's smile was icy. "Intent doesn't negate illegality. And since Luca never consented to any of this, your justification won't hold up in court." Silence. A long, thick silence. I leaned on the railing and crossed my arms. "Do you know what it felt like to be told that my absence would make life easier for you? On my birthday? Do you even realize what you said? What it meant?" My dad looked away. Clara was silent. My mom opened her mouth, but again, nothing came out. I left. I continued. Because I needed peace. Because for years I've been the safety net, the backup plan, the financial crutch none of you even thanked. And the second I tried to breathe, you panicked. Because I was never a son to you. I was a tool. Something useful. And when I stopped being useful, you called me selfish." Mira took out the final sheet. "This is a formal notice. Luca is filing to freeze all joint accounts where his name is involved. He will also be pursuing compensation for damages to his credit, unauthorized debts, and emotional distress. The total amount stands at roughly $194,000, not including legal fees." My dad stood suddenly, knocking his chair back. "You think you're going to take us down with this? You think a judge will side with you over your own family?" That's when I stepped in closer. "No, I think a judge will side with the evidence," I said, voice steady. "And trust me, there's more. I have the emails, the texts, even voice memos." "You're not as careful as you think," Rick muttered. "This is nuts. We didn't mean for it to go this far." Mira glanced at her watch. "You have 7 days to respond to the notice. If you choose to settle out of court, we're open to negotiation. If not, we proceed with full legal action." Clara suddenly burst out. "So that's it? You're just going to destroy us? Everything we've worked for?" I laughed bitterly. "Worked for? You used me. Everything you have was mine, built with my credit, paid for with my effort. I gave you years. And you gave me what? A birthday toast that basically told me I was disposable. She looked like she wanted to argue, but instead she broke down crying. My mom reached out toward me and for a split second her eyes softened. Luca, please. We're family. I stared at her hand. You were my family, I said and backed away. They stood in silence, staring at me like they didn't know who I was anymore. Like I'd turned into someone unrecognizable. Maybe I had. Or maybe they were finally seeing the version of me I'd hidden for years. The version that didn't beg for love. That didn't flinch when pushed. The sun was beginning to dip behind the trees, casting long shadows over the porch. Mira packed the folder back into her briefcase and glanced at me. Are we done here? I nodded. She turned to them. I suggest you get a lawyer. They stood, one by one, and shuffled back to the car. No more shouting. No more bravado. Just silence. The car door slammed. The engine started. And then they were gone. But this wasn't over. Not even close. They didn't respond within the 7 days Mira gave them. Not with a settlement. Not with a counteroffer. Not even with an apology. Just more silence. The kind that used to make me cave when I was younger. When I was the one tiptoeing around their moods, desperate to fix things before they got worse. But now I wasn't the waiting. Mira filed the lawsuit on a Monday morning. I signed every page with a calm hand, feeling lighter with each stroke of the pen. Fraud. Identity theft. Financial damages. Emotional distress. We weren't playing soft anymore. That same week, Clara posted a cryptic message on social media. Something about betrayal. About family turning into strangers. Friends of hers commented with hearts and sad emojis. I didn't respond. I didn't explain. Because for once, I didn't know anyone in explanation. By the following month, the consequences hit hard. First, the court flagged the forged mortgage. My dad tried to argue it was a family arrangement, but Mira brought receipts. Literally. Bank transfers. Time-stamped communications. My travel records proving I wasn't even in the country when I supposedly signed. The judge didn't even blink. The loan was declared invalid. The house wasn't repossessed. Yet. But the bank froze all actions tied to it, including refinancing options. That meant the late payments started stacking up. Interest ballooned. And since their finances were tangled up in the credit lines under my name, their entire financial web began collapsing. Fast. Clara's boutique shut down. Quietly. Without announcement. Just one day the closed for renovations sign appeared and never came down. Rick's car, the one I'd unknowingly co-signed, was repossessed 2 months after he missed back-to-back payments. He left a furious voicemail calling me ungrateful and warning me that karma always comes around. I deleted it without listening to the end. My mom called once. Just once. She didn't beg. She didn't yell. She just said, "You've made your point. We're drowning." And I answered calmly, "No. I've only just started cleaning up the mess you made." The lawsuit took nearly a year to resolve. They dragged their feet, tried to delay hearings, claimed emotional hardship, even attempted to gaslight the narrative in court, saying I was unstable, holding a grudge, or seeking revenge. But Mira was relentless. Professional. Precise. By the time the final hearing arrived, the judge ruled in my favor on every count. They were ordered to pay restitution. $198,000 total. They lost access to every account tied to my name. My credit was cleared of every fraudulent charge. Clara was even hit with a penalty for forging loan applications, though it stopped short of criminal charges because I agreed not to pursue them. That was the one concession I made. Not because they deserved it, but because I deserved peace. I used part of the settlement to restore my credit and invest in my future. The rest? I used it to renovate the cabin. It took 6 months, but by the time it was done, the place was unrecognizable. The plumbing was updated. Solar panels on the roof. A cozy office space for remote work. A fireplace with a stone chimney my grandfather always dreamed of finishing. It became my home. Not just a place to run to, but a place to live. One afternoon, while I was hauling some firewood, a car pulled into the drive again. I almost ignored it. Visitors were rare, and I preferred it that way, but something told me to check. It was Clara. Alone. She stepped out in worn jeans and a hoodie too big for her. No makeup, no performance. Just her. She looked smaller than I remembered. Not physically, just humbled. She didn't come close. She stood by the car, hands buried in her sleeves. "I'm not here to fight," she said. I wanted to see where you went. What you chose instead of us." I nodded slowly and she looked around. The trees. The porch. The quiet air. "It's beautiful," she said softly. I get it now. I didn't speak. I was awful to you, she continued. We all were. I think. I think we needed you to be the responsible one because none of us were ready to grow up. And when you finally stopped holding us up, we collapsed. Because we'd never learned to stand on our own. I raised an eyebrow. Is that an apology? She met my eyes. It's an attempt. I don't expect forgiveness. I just thought. If you ever wondered whether we regretted it, we do. Or at least I do. I believed her. Not because her voice shook or because she looked tired, but because there was no begging, no manipulation, no defense. Just quiet truth. I nodded once. I appreciate you coming all the way here to say it. She lingered, maybe expecting more, maybe hoping for something else. But I didn't offer it. After a moment, she smiled faintly, turned, and got back into the car. As the engine faded into the distance, I turned back to the cabin, the cold wind brushing my face. And for the first time in years, I felt free. Not just from the debt. Not just from the house. But from the weight of being the good son. The quiet fixer. The invisible crutch. I had faced them. Exposed them. Fought back. And I hadn't needed to scream or break down to do it. I just needed to walk away. To vanish. And when I did, they finally saw me. But by then, I was already gone.